The news rumbles on about the stake sales in the hundred, and everyone's got an opinion. Most people seem to be on a similar sort of page with this, that it could be the shot in the arm that county cricket needs. But as I was talking about last week, counties need to be very, very careful. Now, joining me to talk about this is a good friend and supporter of the show, David Griffin, Griff, as he's known to many. Griff, morning, and
Good morning.
on the face of it, I mean, the amounts of money involved here are absolutely huge.
Yes, and I think if you don't mind, I'm just going to go back to where the issues of financial uh, problems came about in the county game, because this goes back 25 years ago, and it's very easy to just look at it as something that's only been a recent thing with the advent of the hundred. But 25 years ago, the ECB put in place this bidding process for Test match cricket. Now, hitherto, we'd had six Test match grounds, which all managed to have usually a Test match every year if six were staged. But if not, the one that missed out would get more one-day international cricket. So they were all able to use their grounds for international cricket every year. And then the ECB, in their wisdom, said, let's do a bid. Let's go with a bidding scheme where clubs will bid for Test match cricket. And as a result, we ended up with nine Test match grounds. So we added Chester Street, Cardiff, and Hampshire, Southampton. And of course, Gloucestershire joined the fray for international cricket with Bristol. And the reality was there wasn't enough international cricket to go around. And as a result, those grounds began to redevelop at huge cost. And so we had a situation where when I joined the Derbyshire Committee in 1999, I got my ECB book that said there's no debt in the game. And now, 25 years later, it's nearly 300 million. So the root of the financial problem goes back 25 years. If they'd have just stuck with the six established Test match grounds, we wouldn't have got into the financial difficulties that we have. However, there's nothing we can do about that. But fast forward, one of the real reasons why the 100 was needed by those select few clubs was because they were the ones carrying the most debt. And they desperately needed a way in which they could recoup that debt. And they saw the 100 initially, four extra games, big crowds, big attendances, as a way of bringing that money in.
That's a really interesting point. And we've seen, I mean, Durham is the one that sort of springs to mind, but I mean, you just got to look at Old Trafford and compare. I remember going there in, I think it was 2000, and watching Brian Lara getting 100 for the West Indies. And my memories of the ground then, I mean, the wicket was 90 degrees to where it is now.
Yes,
They changed,
they played East West like we did at Derby.
yeah. And the ground itself was completely different. But I just sort of wonder why the need for such monumental change. That I mean, it ruined Durham and cost them dearly. Um, and to basically end up with the situation that we've got now with the club's finances.
Well, I always argued that what the ECB should have done, and assuming they could do this right, which is not a given, was that they should have said, right, we have got millions of pounds coming into cricket, which we distribute all the time. Bear in mind, this century, Derbyshire spent over £12 million at the county ground, all of it money that they've been given, either by Sport England, New Deal, or the ECB. What I think the ECB should have done to spare the Test match counties all of this debt was to help them to develop their grounds, to look at them and say, this is what we need to do. Just these six Test match grounds, we need to redevelop them so they are fit for purpose in the 21st century. And they should have helped them to do that. Then they should have said to the other county grounds, you're not going to get Test status ever. Let's not beat about the bush here. But over time, we'll also help you to develop your ground. So there could have been a systematic, sympathetic, and financially prudent way of developing all the grounds. Instead, what they did was there's this huge race, which, as you say, Hampshire joined and Glamorgan joined and Durham joined, and all it did was added debt on. And Lancashire had to go with the changes because they needed to secure their Test match status. I think it was Nottinghamshire a few years ago announced they were going to budget for £1 million loss in a year where there was no Test match, which is absolutely crazy. We shouldn't have got into that position. Sadly, we did, and that's why we're now in the position we're in today.
Yeah, it's I was talking about this with Hugh Turberville, and he liked my turn of phrase, the Faustian deal, which has been put to the counties. Um, I always feel, looking back at the history of the ECB, that and it's kind of a microcosm to how a lot of counties are run by basically ex-players, to use a rugby term, stuffed blazers, that are mired in the game itself, but have little or no business acumen. And when I look at what the ECB and the TCCB before that, so it was a great thing inventing the 2020 Cup 20, just over 20 years ago. Fantastic. I mean, look at where that format is now. But they never quite grasped it because they didn't have the acumen of the BCCI, who, well, we've seen what's happened to the IPL and how they ran away with it. And it seemed to me that the ECB, ever since then, have been playing catch up. And the invention of the 100, a format that no one else plays, and none of the other global broadcasters have really shown much interest in. But hey presto, they've managed to, through these stake sales, managed to generate huge, huge sums of money. I think it's getting for £1 billion once it's all, if it's realised, because I still think there's devil in the detail with this. Um, so on the face of that, and that's getting distributed around the counties and even down to grassroots level. Um, my fear, and it's just my personal opinion, is that if the 100 becomes a T20 format, which I think it will when the current broadcast deal runs out in 2028, that is going to ruin the Blast, which is the lifeblood for most English county cricket clubs. Um, and then all of a sudden, this money that they, their income streams start to dwindle. They can't survive on red ball cricket. I think Simon Hughes wrote in a piece recently that there's only 30 days of a year where clubs are, um, well, not completely full, but sort of reasonable attendances. And we know from county cricket, the point I'm trying to make is that this money needs to be really, really carefully invested at clubs because it will run out if they're not careful. And I kind of think that that's the ECB's design.
Well, that is the challenge. If you look at what the ECB have been trying to do for the last 20 years, they've introduced performance related fee payments based on how many young cricketers locally produced you've got in your team. They've introduced enormous levels of governance changes, making sure that you've got broader representation on the boards. But I don't see anywhere down the line where they've actually brought in any business or financial competence checks or for example, there is an enormous amount of debt in the county game, and they're saying that this money that's coming to the counties is, they use this word, unfettered, and that it's got to be used for the reduction of debt or ground development or reserves. Now, I like the idea of reserves because at Derbyshire we've got no debt. Now, if we get 25 million, we could stick it in the bank at 5%, and after year one, I've 1.25 million,
Yeah.
which we can give to Mickey Arthur. I mean, there is that sort of astonishing growth that we could have at Derbyshire because we don't have debt. But here's the thing. I'm not going to select a particular county, but there are 15 of them who you can go onto the relevant websites at the FCA, and you can look at their accounts. You can download their accounts. They're there for the public to see. And you can see the millions of pounds that are owned by the non-host counties. Now, in my view, if the ECB really, really meant this to be done properly, they would say, we will pay that debt. We want to look at that debt and we want to get that debt paid off. You will get the residue. Because it's all well and good saying, I think there was a piece in the Q&A on their website the other day that said the counties will have autonomy over the money, but within an ECB framework. Well, just look in the dictionary of what autonomy means. Autonomy means you have complete control over it. So you can't have both. So have they got autonomy or have they not? Because the last thing you want to do is to give to counties. I mean, let's face it, a large number of the counties that are the international grounds, their debt has come about from the ground development, and I can understand that they've done that as a way of investing, over the years, and doubtless the 100 will prove this. They'll fill the ground more often, therefore justifying why they spent the money in the first place. But the smaller counties, in the main, their debt will have come from overpaying players that they couldn't afford in the first place. Now, there's been criticism at Derbyshire for this, that, Derbyshire have not gone into debt. They've not bothered sticking an extra few £100,000 on their cricket budget. Why not? Everybody else does. Now, if you give these counties millions of pounds, is there anything to suggest in the long term, if the money is really autonomous, you can do what you want with it, that they won't just spend it on cricketers. In which case, as with football and with rugby, all that will happen as money comes into the game is players' salaries will go up and the debt levels will once again go higher. Cricket's never been richer prior to this deal, and yet there's still an inordinate amount of debt.
Yeah, that's I regularly compare what's happened to the game of rugby in this country to what is potentially happening in cricket and how the future might look. And yeah, and it also concerns me that there's a perception. I'm not saying it's the reality, but there's a perception of um, the top players starting to act like prima donna footballers on, huge salaries and not really giving a stuff, picking and choosing games that they play for. And the England setup at the moment and what we've seen from recent games, and stories of preferring to be on the golf course rather than going training, just sends a message that leaves a rather nasty taste in the mouth to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess that my interest in the international game has reduced dramatically. Partly, I have to say, purely because of the schedule. As a young man, I grew up, well, the last quarter of the 20th century, watching county cricket and watching how players emerged from county cricket, became international cricketers, and then would come back. Sometimes the day after a test match to play in a knockout game or whatever. And I accept it was a different time, but you reach the point where you look at a cricketer and you think, well, I've never even seen him. I've never seen him. I've never seen him in the flesh. And, I've not missed a day of Derbyshire cricket home and away for 16 years, but there are players in the England team I've never seen. And so it's hard to kind of to have that relationship that you used to have as a kid or as a young man when you saw Chris Old and Jeff Arnold and Bob Willis and Mike Brown, these kind of people in the county game. And you're absolutely right. There is this sense that how grounded are they still to the game that their predecessors played. But I guess that is the money, isn't it? We see it in so many other walks of life, not just sport.
Yeah. Um, and also, I think England's recent selection policy seems to have raised eyebrows where they pick people on things that they've seen, not necessarily through their county form or, building up a reputation. It makes me wonder that, there's a subtext to all of this about, oh, we're going to develop the grassroots game. Now, if England are picking players just because they think they're a good lad, or they might be good at the bar, they might be good on the golf course, they might fit in well with the groovy gang, not on any kind of pedigree or talent path or anything like that. That does send an even worse message down the food chain to the counties, to the clubs, and to young kids that want to get into the game because where's their ladder of progression? It doesn't seem to
Yeah,
be
and
happening.
taking a punt on the player, if it works, is it makes you look like some kind of genius. But taking a punt on a player and it doesn't work makes you look like you. I hesitate to say this, but it makes you look like not lazy, but you can't be bothered, if you like, to
Yeah,
look at the people who are day in, day out doing the job, if you like. And I think all of us probably agree that there's one only has to look at Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, at Jimmy Cook, at Alistair Cook and Joe Root to see that the Test match game is still played by great players with the correct technique. And if you look at their record, it's an astonishing one. There are very few players who become great players who come from a pedigree of kind of, a whim where someone has just said, yeah, I like the look of him, let's give it a go. And as I say, when it works, that's fine. But when it doesn't, it's not so. And also, I guess, if you are a player who's plying your trade in county cricket, I mean, it's already bad enough. A quick story. I did an evening with Wayne Madsen that was very well attended, very well received in November at Derby. And we talked about the fact that he'd never got international recognition by England. And, I made the case that there'd perhaps been a time over the last decade when maybe there was an opportunity for him, at England's best. Clearly, he probably wasn't good enough to get in that side. But there were times when there was a lot of chopping and changing. He was the leading run scorer, for example, in Division 1 in 2013, but didn't get a look in anyway. But he acknowledged that playing Division 2 cricket wasn't helpful. And you have across the board, oh, well, he plays Div 2, he plays Div 2, he plays Div 2, until it suits somebody, so I quite like the look of him, and then they pick him. But it does make you wonder what players are doing sometimes and how they feel as individuals, churning runs out year after year after year in either Division 1 or 2, but nobody gives them a look at. Obviously, your neck of the woods down at Essex, I can think of several cricketers, particularly with the ball there. And, you must think, well, can't be bad cricketers. They're taking wickets in the top division. We've got some world great coaches working in the county game, some top class players still coming to play in the county game. But it does seem there's a little bit of, I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's a bit chancy, I think. A bit chancy, Darren, sometimes, some of these selections. And of course, it could all come unstuck this next winter.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm just you prodded me on thinking about Ben Folkes,
Yes.
going back 10 years or so when Essex were Div 2, and he was encouraged to move to Surrey, because they thought that being a Div 1 side, although Surrey at the time was sort of a bit up and down themselves, but there was this perception of if you were playing Div 2, you wouldn't get even a look at. You'd have to be playing in the top flight. Um, I want to explore the social side of this as well, what county cricket means to the likes of you and me. Now, there's a huge social aspect to this, mental health, whatever you want to call it, of people that go along to enjoy county cricket, to enjoy the more sedate pace of it, the ebb and flow of the game. Um, I know plenty of men of a certain age who want to go to get away from the wife and the kids and all the rest of it and spend, even if it's just an afternoon down at the county ground or wherever, just a bit of peace and quiet, a bit of me time, enjoying the game. Um, and I sort of wonder whether that can be, and I think that's very, very important. I think that means a lot to a lot of people. And people get accused of, or the county game gets accused of being, oh, it's only there for the Silver Hair Brigade. Well, yes, but that's not to be discounted. We're told that the youngsters want to watch the bish bash bosh of white ball, but I think that gets missed a lot about the importance of the red ball.
Yes, I think there are two factors at play here. I think first of all, the Red Ball County game is there's a remarkable level of fellowship within the game. I'm very fortunate. I've had a lifetime watching it, and therefore I can walk into a ground and instantly talk to people that I've known down the years. But by the same token, I watch people coming on their first visit to a ground that will automatically find someone to talk to. It's that kind of game. It's also a fascinating game to watch. It is like a game of chess. You can watch a game of cricket unfold. And one of the joys of domestic 4-day cricket is, yes, sometimes a batter will come out and swing from the hip from the start, but at times you can almost close your eyes and go back a century and think, this is what I would have been watching 100 years ago. 3 slips and a gully, seam bowler trying to hit the top of off stump, batters trying to get in. That it's timeless in that sense. But the sense of fellowship in mind, I've always argued, and I've written about this, and I've stated it previously. For me, the greatest quality for cricket, the greatest attraction, is the fellowship of the game. But I think the second thing is this, and you just used, I think, do you say silver-haired or white-haired?
Silver Hair Brigade, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the ECB make great play of trying to attract young people to cricket. But I read, I think only yesterday, that there's something like 11 million people over the age of 65 in this country. Now, I know, as a married man with a granddaughter who we're taking to the pantomime this afternoon in Burton-on-Trent, well, there's a reason why we're going and why grandparents from the other side of the family are going, because we've got the time to do it. We can afford to do it. We've got both the money and the time to be able to do it. But nobody seems within the game of cricket to target people with white hair. And you think, well, their money's as good as anybody's. Why are we not targeting them? I mean, you've only got to put on the afternoon television and look at the advertisements.
Yeah.
The cruisers around the fjords are targeting them, and the stairlifters are targeting them. Why isn't cricket targeting that age group of people? So many have retired early, so many with good pensions. Why are they not targeting them? Because somebody will target them and they'll spend their money on something. Why not cricket? But nobody, it seems, is saying, let's get the white-haired brigade into county cricket grounds and explain to them just how relaxing and how much fun it can be. And it requires very little effort, really, once you're there, to just sit there in the stands. And I know it's horrible in early April and what have you, but by and large, it's a very, very sedate way to pass the time of day.
You just give me a business idea. I'm going to get going. But it's true, and I sort of wonder about this a lot because, as you say, all the eyeballs seem to be on bringing the youngsters into the game. Hunter's done a great job of bringing in a new audience, and well done
Yep.
them. But again, I sort of wonder about the people that are in charge, the great and the good that make these decisions, because there doesn't seem to be any kind of joined up thinking about how you appeal to the youngsters. Um, there's an argument about getting it on free to air television, but then other people will tell me that people don't watch sport like that anymore. They watch them on their phones or on their laptops, and they want
Yep.
highlights and they want in social media and this, that, and the other. Um, okay, I get that, but what also concerns me is if you've got a grandchild or a youngster that says, I want to get into cricket," and I've been very active in the last few years of as it's dwindled at schools, encouraging my local club to be active in approaching schools and saying, "Come down, have a take, come down one evening, won't cost you anything, have a go. We'll play with some softball," and just getting kids interested in the game. The,
Yep.
the, the, the whole schools idea, I think, is gone. The playing fields are gone, and kids' general interest in sports seems to be, I don't know, just moving in a different direction. If we're trying to attract, and we're told money's coming down to grassroots cricket, have you got any thoughts about how the most effective way to encourage grassroots participation?
Absolutely. I most certainly have. And I would go back to schools. Now, you've just said that the playing fields have gone. Well, they have. But how many state schools have got a swimming pool? Most of them haven't got one, but the kids still learn to swim. How do they learn to swim? Because they either form up as a little crocodile and walk through the town to the local swimming pool, or they get on a bus and are taken to the swimming pool. So why can't we do that with cricket? Because wherever you look, wherever I live here, there are cricket grounds everywhere. And yes, they're used in the evenings and they're used at the weekends. But Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, there's nobody there. Now, if you really, really wanted to, you could say to those cricket grounds, all of which are in a catchment area where there's a school, okay, there is someone to play, somewhere rather, to play cricket. There's a pavilion, there's the outfield, there's somewhere to go and play cricket. So the idea that the school playing fields have gone is correct, but there is a replacement. But then you say, well, how do you fund it? Well, we've just been given supposedly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. So what about the teachers that's going to do it? We don't need the teachers to do it. You've got more cricketers today than we. Don't forget, they're all full-time cricketers now at professional level. So they don't have a second job like they used to do back in the day. So when they get to the end of the careers, a lot of them are in panic mode. What am I going to do for a living? Well, there you go. You become a school's cricket coach, and you kind of own a small cricket ground where you run your cricket during the course of the week. As I say, if we can do it for swimming, which we do, then we can do it for cricket. Another business plan. I'm giving you these for free, Darren.
Don't worry,
But
Dave.
you've got to want to do it. But if you were to go to a school and say, right, you've got to fill a section of your school year, your summer term with sport. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll do it for you. We'll put the bus outside your ground. We'll take you to the local cricket ground. We'll have a coach there to give your 30 kids, 60 kids, 80 kids an afternoon of cricket, and we'll bus them all back to the school for you. Schools will be more than happy with that.
Well, this kind of encapsulates my sort of train of thought on this whole thing, whether it's grassroots, schools, all the way up through counties and even to international level. There's no clarity of thought going on. There are people that are making the decisions that aren't qualified on the large. There are one or two about that's still good and very creative, whatever else. But I think the game is suffering and will continue to suffer from poor decision making, which my greatest fear is that you'll start to see counties in deep, deep trouble, and the money will be getting very low, if not having run out, and then there's no future of any kind.
Yeah, well, that is the problem with the game. I suspect that, I mean, I hate to say this because I don't want this to happen, but I think it probably is the most likely outcome is that the game will contract. It will be centred in the seven cities, because two are in London, aren't they? Two of the 100 teams. And you may well find that all cricket is played at those venues and those venues alone, and that there's some way in which the team that plays under the moniker of, for example, Trent Rockets, play a form of red ball cricket, maybe 4-6 games a summer, just to keep their eye in. But of course, at risk here are not just the non-host counties, but even the host counties. Because you could see a scenario, the people that bought Trent Rockets don't want Nottinghamshire, do they? They want the ground. They want to be able to play on this ground where they can put 17,000 people, beautifully developed ground, the same with Lords and everywhere else. But they don't want Glamorgan and Nottinghamshire and Lancashire. I may be wrong on that, but I'd be very, very surprised if you've spent all these millions of pounds because you care about county cricket. No, you care about what you can get out of this 100 team. And, I've used the phrase, the devil will take the hindmost. And I suspect that that's what will happen here. I think in the short term, counties like my own will have nice gleaming stands. I think we'll have a nice new building for hospitality and to try and attract non-cricket audiences to put money into the ground. I think we'll have some money in reserves, which will bring us some nice free interest, if you like. But beyond that, how are you going to get more people to come and watch the game? I'll just give you some stats. One of the most annoying, if you don't mind, one of the most annoying things about cricket is they never publish attendance figures until the following April in Wisdom. So unlike football, where you see the stats on a daily basis, you go online, you see what the attendances were. In 2019, before the 100, there were 1.556 million people watch domestic cricket. That was 4-day cricket, 50 over cricket, T20. Now that had dropped by over 200,000 by 2023. Now in the meantime, the 100 began and brought 500,000 in 2023. So there was a net increase of 300,000. Now I'm quite looking forward to the end of April when the 2025 Wisdom comes out, because it'll give us last season's figures. But if we're not careful and county cricket's figures keep dropping, and there's not much room for the 100 figures to go up because we keep being told the grounds are full, we could end up in a situation where we're net, no gain. And if you look back at what the whole purpose of the 100 was for, it was to expand the game at every level. And I'm not sure that we're going to get that. It's been very interesting to see what the numbers are come April.
That'll be a very good point. And my fear is that all this money has come from, I mean, the ECB's got in bed with some very, very serious global players, businessmen, huge corporations. If they don't think they're getting value for money, they are going to demand, because they can, these kind of changes that you're talking about. And
Yep.
as you say, Trent Rockets, Manchester Originals, the London franchises as well, are going to be, there are going to be some pretty ugly changes demanded. Um, I guess that's another conversation for further down the line when we can sit here and say, I told you so. Um, but I think we are at a point now where everyone, top to bottom, has got to be very, very careful.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I think that there's been, clearly there's been a challenge. Something had got to give, because otherwise the game was going down the pan. And I think it really, really was. And to a certain extent, we've just talked about the joy of county cricket and red ball cricket. And I absolutely understand those who say, but you're only sustained by the centre, which for me has been the greatest attribute of cricket for the last 100 years, that the centre has kept us sustained. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a very, very egalitarian system. But I can't see a businessman, as you've said, that's just spent £100 million or more buying a cricket team, to give a fig about making sure that Derbyshire after 2028 get their £1.3 million a year. Why should they? Why should they, when they're doing the TV deal and everything else, be worried about whether Derbyshire, Worcestershire, Leicestershire, or we must make sure they get their 1.3 million? Why? Why would they be bothered about that? And the ECB up to now have said, oh, no, don't worry, they'll get the 1.3, get the 1.3. Well, that's while the ECB have still got some degree of control. But that will presumably not last either.
Well, fingers crossed, this people make the right decisions and this goes in the right way.
I hope so,
Griff,
Darren.
fantastic to catch up as always. we could go on for another hour. So we're probably going for another whole year. I'll have to get up to Derbyshire and we will
Please
talk
do.
at greater length this summer.
Please do. We're
Okay,
playing at six later this year in the 50 overs, so come on up.
I will, and I'll come looking for you.
All right, mate.
All right, David Griffin, very, very interesting conversation, and I'm sure we will be talking about this for a long time into the future.